The wind carried the scent of ash and blood across the battlefield. Keldren stood at the edge of the burning village, his sword heavy in his hand. Smoke curled in the air like snakes. Behind him, the Elven commander gave a quiet order. The other human soldiers obeyed without question, their eyes dull, their shoulders low. They were not warriors. They were tools. Kale hated that. He had fought for the elves since he was 16. They had taken him from a prison camp, trained him to fight their wars, and praised him when he won. They said he was different, smarter, stronger, worthy of wearing their armor. But Kale knew the truth. He was still a human, still looked down on, still just a weapon in their hands. The village was quiet now. Only the crackle of fire remained. Kale sheathed his sword and walked through the rubble. A broken wagon lay on its side. A child's doll, covered in soot, stared at the sky. Kale paused. He bent down and picked it up, brushing off the ash. Then he placed it gently on the step of a burnt home. No one would return for it, but it deserved more than the dirt. Move, an Elven soldier barked behind him. Kale said nothing. He moved. They marched north for hours, through thick forest and cold winds. By sunset, they reached the ruins. Old stone walls, overgrown and quiet, rose from the ground like the bones of a sleeping giant. Elves did not come here often. They said the place was cursed. Kale did not believe in curses. He believed in what he could see, and what he saw was strange. While the others made camp, Kale wandered deeper into the ruins. The trees here whispered. The stones were warm under his boots, though the air was cold. Something pulled at him, quiet and steady, like a distant drum. Then he found it. A door, half buried in moss. Not a normal door. It was made of black iron, shaped with symbols Kale did not know. It stood in a circle of stones, untouched by time. Kale stepped closer. The door pulsed once. Then it opened. Inside was darkness, cold, deep, and full of silence. But Kale stepped in. He found himself in a round chamber. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a strange object. It looked like a shard of metal, glowing faintly red. It hummed softly, like it breathed. Kale reached out. The moment his fingers touched it, something surged through him. Not pain, not fear. Something old, something his. He heard a voice, not with his ears, but in his mind. You are not broken. You were made to forget. Now remember. Kale staggered back, heart pounding. The ember core pulsed brighter in his hand. Outside, the elves waited. They would never understand. But Kale did. And something inside him had just awakened. The ember core stayed hidden beneath Kale's armor, close to his skin. It no longer pulsed with light, but he could still feel it like a quiet heartbeat that was not his own. The voice had not spoken again, but its message stayed with him. You were made to forget. Now remember. Back at the camp, no one asked where Kale had gone. The Elven commander was too busy writing reports, and the other soldiers were too tired to care. Kale sat near the fire, staring into the flames, thinking of the voice, the glowing shard, and the old ruins. He had questions, but he had no one to ask. The next day, the army marched again. They passed through farming towns and old roads, where human workers bowed low as the elves rode by. Kale saw it all with new eyes. The broken wagons, the silent faces, the scars on old hands. He saw the fear. Not from war, but from years of being told they were less. That night, in a village by the river, Kale heard a whisper in the dark. It came from the shadows behind the barn. You carry it, don't you? A voice asked. Kale turned, hand on his sword. A figure stepped into the moonlight. It was a woman, wrapped in a traveler's cloak, eyes sharp and watching. She looked human, but there was something strange in the way she held herself, calm but ready. Who are you? Kale asked. Someone who remembers, she said, like you. Kale didn't speak. The ember core grew warm. My name is Mira. I've been looking for signs of the old ways. Signs of the ember core, she said. And now I've found one. Kale studied her. What do you know about it? Mira stepped closer. I know it belonged to the last kings of the human world. Before the elves came. Before they took everything. It's not just a weapon. It's a key. A key to what? Kale asked. To waking us up, she said, to ending this. Kale thought of Kale had learned how to wear his mask well. Every day, he rose with the elves, trained with them, and followed their commands. No one suspected him. No one suspected the ember core hidden beneath his armor, nor the growing fire in his heart. But every day, the mask grew heavier. He had been part of the Elven army for years, and they had trained him to think like them. Their ways, their honor, their power. But now he saw through it. The elves believed themselves above all others, immortal, wise, and powerful. But Cal had seen the cracks in their perfection. He had seen their cruelty behind their smooth smiles, their lies wrapped in gold. The more Cal learned about the elves, the more he felt like a puppet on a string. Each mission, each conquest, felt empty. He was not fighting for glory, nor for justice. He was fighting to keep the humans in their place, to make them weaker, to ensure they would never rise up. And then there was the city of Elenvalis, the heart of the Elven kingdom, a shining city where the elves lived in luxury while the humans were kept in the shadows. Kale had been there before, but now it felt different. He saw the faces of the humans who worked in the fields, the markets, the homes. They were never seen, never heard. They were invisible to the elves. One night, while the elves celebrated their latest victory in a grand hall, Kel slipped away. The Ember Core was calling to him, a soft hum in the back of his mind. He walked through the darkened streets, away from the bright lights of the palace. He had heard whispers, rumors of secret meetings, humans planning in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike. The city felt alive with secrets. The air was thick with tension. Kel moved quietly through the streets, following the faint trail of voices until he reached an old, abandoned building. Inside, a group of humans stood gathered in the dim light. They were dressed in simple clothes, their faces hard with determination. At the front of the group stood Mira, her eyes sharp and focused. "Kale," she whispered, her voice urgent. "You've been chosen." Kale stepped forward, his heart racing. "What do you mean?" "We've been waiting for someone like you," Mira said. "Someone who knows their ways but sees through the lies. You fought for the elves. Now you can fight for us." Cal hesitated. The Ember Core pulsed beneath his armor, as if urging him forward. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice steady but uncertain. Mira's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "We need your help to wake up the others. The Ember Core will do more than just fight. It will bring them back. It will remind them who they really are." Kale felt the weight of her words. The Ember Core was more than a weapon. It was a key to something deeper, something forgotten. And now he had to choose. To continue serving the elves or to help the humans rise. He knew what he had to do. The mask was slipping. "Let's begin," he said, his voice full of resolve. The days that followed were filled with planning and action. Kale no longer moved through the Elven kingdom as a soldier with no choice. Now he moved with purpose, each step bringing him closer to his goal. He had joined the humans who were secretly rising up. But every action felt like a leap into the unknown. The Ember Core, now fully awakened, rested close to Kale's side, and it hummed softly with each passing day. Its power had begun to change him, not just physically, but in the way he saw the world. It gave him new clarity, a vision of what could be, and what had been stolen. His thoughts were clearer now, and the echo of the forgotten kings filled his mind. The Ember Core spoke, not in words, but in ideas, images, memories from a time when humans were kings before the elves arrived. Kale met with the other human leaders at night, in hidden places away from the elven patrols. They were a small group, farmers, blacksmiths, old warriors, and they spoke in hushed tones, making their plans. Mira was always there, her eyes sharp, her mind quick. She helped guide the group, always reminding them of their goal, to awaken the humans from their long sleep, to make them remember who they were, to help them stand once more. "We have the Ember Core," Mira would say, her voice steady. "But it's only a symbol. The true power is in the people. We must make them believe in themselves again." But Kale felt the weight of their actions. Every step they took to fight the elves was a step toward something much bigger, something that could not be undone. And the more he saw the faces of the humans, their quiet suffering, the more he knew he could not turn back. One night, the group planned an attack on a supply route. The elves were moving weapons, and the humans needed those supplies to strengthen their fight. Kale and Mira led the way. They moved quickly and quietly, shadows beneath the stars, through the dense forest that bordered the elven lands. The plan was simple: strike fast, take what they needed, and disappear before the elves could retaliate. But as they approached the ambush site, Kale saw something that made his blood run cold. A group of elves had already set up a camp nearby. They were well armed and aware of the area. "We've been spotted," Kel whispered, his heart pounding. He knew their plan would be ruined if they attacked now. "We can't turn back now," Mira said, her voice firm but calm. "We must fight." Kel nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The ember core throbbed with energy, urging him forward. It was time to fight, to prove that humans were more than just tools to be used. They were more than just shadows in the Elven kingdom. The battle that followed was swift and brutal. Kale fought like a man possessed, his blade cutting through the air, his movements quick and precise. Mira was beside him, moving with a grace that seemed to come from years of hiding and surviving. The humans, fueled by the Ember Core's power, fought fiercely, pushing back against the elves who had underestimated them. By the time the elves realized what was happening, it was too late. The humans had taken the supplies they needed and disappeared into the night. They had struck their first blow against the elves. As the group made their way back to safety, Cal felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just the Ember Core's power. It was the strength of the people he fought alongside, the strength of the rebellion that was growing every day. The fire had started, and it would not be put out. The elves would learn what it meant to face humanity's true power. Kale looked at Mira, and for the first time, he saw not just a leader, but a symbol of hope. The success of their first strike had given the humans new hope. Word spread quickly through the hidden villages, the rebel camps, and the farmlands where people had long been silenced. Kale felt it, too, a quiet energy in the air, like the world itself was waiting for something to change. The Ember Core, though still a mystery to him in many ways, had become the heart of their movement. It gave the humans a power they had forgotten they possessed, a strength that was not just physical, but something deeper, something ancient. It made Kale see the world differently. It showed him that they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their history, their freedom, their future. Mira and Kale met often in the secret meeting places, where the flickering light of a small fire cast long shadows on the walls. They spoke of plans, of strategies, and of the next steps. They knew the elves would come for them. They knew the rebellion was still too small, too weak to take on the full might of the elven army. But they also knew that every strike they made, every victory, would inspire others. "The elves believe we are broken," Mira said one evening, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "They think we are weak, but we have strength they cannot understand." Kale nodded. "We have the Ember Core. We have the fire." "We have more than that," she replied, her voice steady. "We have each other. We have the will to stand against them." And stand they would. Kale could feel the growing power in every human he met. Farmers, blacksmiths, hunters, all united by a single goal. The time for fear was over. The time for action had come. Soon, the first real battle came. It was not in the open fields, nor in the grand cities where the elves ruled. No, the humans struck at the heart of the elves' supply lines, hidden places deep in the forests, in the caves beneath the mountains. The elves never expected an attack in these remote areas. They were too focused on the cities, too proud to believe that the humans could organize without their notice. The plan was simple: attack in small groups, fast and silent, take what they could, and disappear before the elves could respond. It was the perfect strategy for a rebellion that had little to no resources, and it worked. Kale led a small group, including Mira, into the forest to intercept an elven caravan carrying supplies and weapons. They moved through the shadows, silent as ghosts, and when the elves finally noticed them, it was already too late. The humans struck with precision, overwhelming the surprised elves before they could react. Kel's blade flashed in the dark, and the Ember Core pulsed with energy as he fought. It was not just a weapon now. It was a symbol of their defiance, of the new world they were creating. They were no longer the weak, helpless humans the elves had thought them to be. They were a force that could not be ignored. When the battle ended, the humans had taken the supplies they needed, and the elves were left in disarray. Kale stood among the fallen elves, breathing heavily, his heart pounding in his chest. But it was not fear that filled him, it was hope. The rebellion had begun in earnest, and the elves would learn that the humans were not to be underestimated. "This is only the beginning," Kale said quietly to Mira as they surveyed the aftermath. Mira smiled, a spark of fire in her eyes. "Yes, it's just the beginning." The days after their latest victory passed quickly, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Word of the human rebellion spread far and wide, reaching the ears of the elves. What had once been a small secret group was now growing stronger, with more villages joining their cause. But with every step forward, the elves also grew more vigilant. The calm before the storm had ended. Now the rebellion was at the center of the elves' attention. Kel could feel the change in the air as he walked among his people. The Ember Core, once a quiet hum, now pulsed with an energy that was harder to ignore. He had always been able to sense its power, but now it felt like it was calling to him more urgently, as if something was shifting deep within it. He had learned that the Ember Core was more than just a weapon. It was a key, and it was awakening something old, something buried. But what that something was, Kale had yet to understand. Mira was just as focused as ever. Despite the growing dangers, her resolve never wavered. The humans were no longer just hiding in the shadows. They were striking back. Their raids were becoming bolder, and they were hitting harder. But that only meant the elves would soon turn their attention fully on the rebellion. Kale could already see the signs. The patrols were tighter, the soldiers more alert. The elves were preparing for something, and Kale feared it was a retaliation unlike anything the humans had seen before. One evening, as the rebellion gathered in their hidden camp, Mira came to Kale with troubling news. "We've intercepted an Elven message," she said, her voice low but urgent. "They are planning a counterattack. They're sending their best forces to crush us once and for all." Kel frowned, feeling the weight of her words. "How soon?" "Within days," Mira replied. "The elves are moving quickly. They've already started to gather their army in the east. We need to act before they can get to us." The camp fell silent as the news spread. The reality of their situation set in. They were no longer fighting small battles in the shadows. The war was coming to them, and it would be a battle for their survival. Kel knew that the rebellion could not survive if they faced the full might of the Elven army head-on. They were outnumbered, outmatched, and lacked the resources to stand against the elves in open battle. Their only hope was to strike first, to weaken the elves before they could launch their counterattack. "We need to disrupt their forces," Kel said, his voice steady. "If we can strike their supply lines and divide their forces, we might have a chance." Mira nodded, a fierce determination in her eyes. "We can't wait. We move tonight." The plan was simple. Kale and a small group of rebels would move out under the cover of darkness and strike at the Elves' supply depot in the east. It was their best chance to slow the Elves down before they could launch their counterattack. The Ember Core pulsed once more at Kale's side, a reminder of the power they held, and the responsibility that came with it. As the rebels prepared to leave, Kale took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the coming battle. The humans had come so far, and now they were on the edge of something much bigger. The fight for their freedom had only just begun. "Let's make it count," Kale said, his eyes hard with resolve. And with that, they set off into the night, knowing that the dawn would bring a new chapter in the war. The kind that would change everything. The night was cold as Kale and the rebels moved through the dense forest. The moonlight barely pierced through the thick canopy above, leaving them in near total darkness. Their footsteps were soft on the forest floor, each step measured and quiet. They had to be silent. The elves were everywhere, their patrols constantly sweeping the land. Any sound, any mistake, could end everything. Kale led the group, the Ember Core close to his side, glowing faintly under his armor. It wasn't much, but it was enough to guide them. The power within the Ember Core was growing stronger with each passing day, and Cal could feel it deep within him. It was like a fire that had started small. It was slowly consuming him from the inside, burning away the doubt and fear. Now he was driven by something more than just survival. He was driven by the need to end this war, to give his people the freedom they deserved. As they moved deeper into the forest, Kel's thoughts returned to the last battle. The humans had struck a blow against the elves, but it had come at a cost. Many had fallen. Kale's heart weighed heavy with the knowledge that their rebellion had become a real war, and every choice now had consequences. Mira had been right. The elves were preparing to strike back. They couldn't wait any longer. Tonight was their chance to hit them where it would hurt most. The Elven supply depot in the east. The elves relied on those supplies to keep their forces moving, and if they could take them out, it would slow the elves down long enough for the rebellion to regroup. After hours of careful movement, they reached the edge of the Elven camp. The depot was a stone structure built into the side of a mountain. Torches lined the walls, casting long shadows across the ground. Guards stood watch, their sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. Kale and his group crouched low behind some boulders, observing their enemies' movements. "We wait for the signal," Mira whispered, her voice barely audible. Kale nodded. His heart was beating faster now, a mix of adrenaline and fear. This was it. If they failed, the elves would come for them with everything they had. But if they succeeded, they could change the tide of the war. The plan was simple. Kale and a few others would sneak into the camp and sabotage the supplies, while the rest would create a distraction. The humans had learned to work as one, no longer scattered, no longer weak. Every movement was part of a bigger whole. As the first signal came, one quiet whistle carried on the wind. Kale sprinted toward the camp, moving swiftly between the shadows. His heart was pounding, and his breath came in quick, silent bursts. He could feel the Ember Core's power thrumming through him, urging him forward, but he pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand. The elves hadn't seen them coming. Kale's group worked with precision, cutting through the guards with swift strikes. They moved quickly, planting explosives on the supply crates and sabotaging the wagons. Every moment felt like a race against time, but Kale knew they couldn't fail. This was the key to the rebellion's survival. When the final crate was set, Kale nodded at Mira. "We're done. Let's move." The group retreated into the forest, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. Behind them, the first explosions rang out, bright flashes of fire lighting up the night sky. The elves would know soon enough that the humans had struck. And they would know, too, that the rebellion was no longer something small or easily ignored. As they made their way back to camp, Kale's heart felt lighter. The fire inside him burned brighter now, and he knew the Ember Core had more to give. The rebellion was just getting started, and with every step, they were moving closer to victory. The morning after the raid, the forest was still dark, even though the sun was trying to rise. The rebels were on edge, their hearts beating fast, waiting for the elves' response. The explosions from the night before had echoed across the land, and now the elves would come in full force. It was only a matter of time before the war escalated. Kale stood at the edge of the camp, staring into the dense trees. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, the Ember Core pressed against his side. He could feel its energy pulsing, like a fire in his veins, urging him to take action. He had no choice now. There was no turning back. The rebellion had gone from a small, secretive group to a real force in the war against the elves. And it was all or nothing. "Kale," Mira said, walking up beside him. Her expression was serious, but there was something else in her eyes, something that told him she was as ready as he was. "They'll come for us today. We need to be ready." Kale nodded. He knew the elves would be angry. They would retaliate with everything they had. But the humans had done something they hadn't expected. They had taken the fight to them. And now the elves would learn what it meant to underestimate humanity. "We'll be ready," Kale said, his voice steady. The rebels moved quickly to prepare. They packed their gear, checked their weapons, and gathered around to discuss the next steps. Kale and Mira worked together, making sure the plans were clear. They needed to keep moving, stay hidden, and strike when the moment was right. The humans had learned how to fight smart, not just with strength, but with strategy. They would have to outthink the elves if they were going to win. By midday, the elves arrived. The ground shook as the elven army approached, their soldiers marching in perfect formation. They were a fearsome sight, shining armor, tall and proud, their weapons gleaming in the sunlight. But this time, the humans were not afraid. They had been preparing for this moment, and they would not back down. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the Ember Core's power within him. It was time to put everything they had learned into practice. The rebels scattered, taking their positions among the trees, ready to launch their ambush. The battle began with the sound of arrows whizzing through the air, followed by the clash of steel. Kale fought at the front, leading the charge with Mira by his side. The Ember Core guided him, giving him strength and speed beyond what he had known before. It was as if the fire inside him had awakened fully, giving him the clarity to see the elves' moves before they made them. The humans fought fiercely, using the terrain to their advantage. They knew the land, the trees, the hidden paths. The elves, despite their superior training and numbers, were caught off guard. For every soldier they sent into the forest, 2 more rebels struck from the shadows. The elven army began to falter, unable to match the humans' surprise attacks. Kel's sword moved like lightning, cutting down one elf after another. His thoughts were sharp, focused only on the task at hand. The Ember Core pulsed within him, and he could feel the power growing stronger, amplifying his every move. After hours of intense fighting, the elves began to retreat, unable to withstand the humans' relentless attacks. The rebels had won their first major victory against the elves, but Kel knew this was just the beginning. The elves would regroup, and the war would continue. But for the first time in a long time, the humans had a real chance. As the battlefield quieted, Kel looked around at his people. They were battered, tired, but they were alive. They had proven something today. They were no longer the weak, oppressed humans the elves had once ruled. They were a force to be reckoned with. "We did it," Mira said, her voice filled with quiet pride. Kel nodded, his eyes shining with determination. "This is only the beginning. We will finish this, for all of us."